Welcome to the Pranatech Podcast.
Scott Johnson is my guest today, and he's been focused in the MedTech industry for quite some time, and he's teaching me a lot. And I want my audience to learn from him. So, Scott, thank you for being on the show today on the Pranatech Podcast, and please intro yourself.
Hey, thanks, Amit. Name is Scott Johnson. Currently, I work within the medtech industry in Orange County on two fronts. One, my daytime job, which is the VP of Sales and Marketing at M4D. It's a contract design and manufacturing facility in Orange County that focuses on product development for neurovascular and interventional radiology products, and also dedicate my time to the nonprofit that I serve as the board of directors on, Device Alliance, which is the largest nonprofit group in Orange County that focuses solely on the medical device industry. So it was actually good to get connected through our mutual friend, Dave Ferreira. So he had actually kind of gave me a shout out, and he said, hey, you got to connect with Amit. He's doing this fun podcast, and him and I, we go way back since our time together on the board of the American Heart Association, where we did some work together for the Heart and Stroke Ball. So great to join you and have the conversation.
Yeah, it's awesome. I love your story. I've read a lot about you, and you're doing a lot of beautiful things. But tell me about your life. Tell me about how you kind of, I would say, you started even getting into this realm, and why did you do it? What was the purpose?
Yeah. Okay, so kind of a funny story. So when I was getting my MBA at Chapman University here in Orange County, I'm sitting in the audience during the commencement speech that your MBA is done, and a MedTech executive came up on stage and actually gave the keynote speech. At the time, it was Joe Chiani of Massimo. And I'm sitting there in the crowd and I'm listening to him give this speech on medical device industry in Orange County. And, all of a sudden you kind of have this moment like, wow, that would have been kind of interesting to get into. My parents were teachers. I kind of like science. I thought it'd be really fun to kind of get in the business of that. But I had focused on finance at the time. I was actually going to be going into business with, a really, really good friend of mine. But it kind of planted this weird seed. And it's funny, right? Like at the end of your education, all of a sudden they plant the seed for this industry you studied nothing about during your whole education. So make a long story very short. At one point in time, I decided, you know what? I'm getting tired making, millionaires lots of money at the business I was at. And I think I want to kind of do something that I have a little bit more purpose. That kind of helps me get out of bed every morning and let's have some fun. So I left banking and I went 100% into the medical device industry. But as you know, it's a hugely intimidating industry, not just from the sense of it's very, very hard to get into, but there's such a depth and breadth of clinical and, biology, medical knowledge, none of which I felt I had. So I went to a medical device sales college to prep myself for at least that entry point, because I thought I could take some of my previous sales and marketing experience and at least kind of apply that to this new realm, at least feel comfortable having clinical conversations with doctors and just understand a little bit more insights in the industry. So when I graduated from that college, I came and got my first job at Massimo, ironically, right, from the company, from the CEO of which I first heard. So that was kind of my first foray into it. And at that point in time, I also knew that I needed to accelerate my learning. And so I had just hung up my responsibilities as far as overseeing like a Chapman Alumni Association at that time. And I started looking around for the best game in town, and I found Device Alliance, which was the big nonprofit group. Distinctly remember rolling into that event, my first event, unemployed at the time, and just talking to the interim president, Kevin McNerney, and saying, hey, someday I'm going to be an executive. I'd like to be part of this executive group. And he goes, oh, well, this is kind of for people that work in the industry. And I said, well, I'll be in the industry. I'll be an executive someday. And he just kind of looked at me. He's like, okay, sure. And I wouldn't take no for an answer. And as they say, kind of the rest is history.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm sure you study politics and geopolitics. How does that actually reflect your businesses, right? Because it's a function of life, right? I follow it very well. Everyone's political in their own sense, but I'm curious, how does that affect you and your values and also your business?
Oh gosh, well, politics. I mean, if I'm being honest, the only time I think that politics has ever pushed up against medical devices was probably during COVID. Was maybe my first experience because we're in the medical device technology field. It's about patient advocacy, and so clinical data, patient advocacy, a lot of those things. Politics doesn't really get into the realm because we're focused so much on delivering healthcare to impact lives around the world. And I think for me, the first time that, you talk about politics and geopolitics, only time I saw it was probably during COVID. And I say that in the sense that I think the temperature was turned up on everyone's personal beliefs, and, certain things would kind of intersect here and there, but it was really on the edges. It didn't too much impact my day to day per se. But, now that I guess, not saying anything, about the current election, but now that we're in a post-election cycle, obviously I'm hopeful for the fact that now that the markets will kind of stabilize, we're going to see some financial tracking, and kind of that's going to be good for the industry as a whole, just to kind of see a lot of these ventures kind of take off and see what happens with the larger mid caps and strategics that kind of want to spend some money delivering healthcare. So yeah, not too much, but famous last words, right? We'll see what the future holds.
Yeah. You said turn up the temperature, right? So when someone has a high fever, they like to work from home. Right?
Well,
So,
and also too, during COVID, what was interesting is, running a nonprofit, all the events went online just as everything else did. And then after about a year, people started reaching out to me saying, hey, Scott, are we going to start doing events? Are we going to start kind of seeing people? It's been a year. And some people, quite frankly, they're like, I've been stuck in my home for a year, Scott. I really need a Device Alliance event. It was funny. But then on the other side, there was, a large portion of people that said, hey, is that the responsible thing to do? I believe we should mask, we should stay at home. And so that's kind of when I started to see that at the ends, because we had to be very cognizant about making sure that we took a step forward that was a representation of the larger body of Device Alliance, and that we kind of offered a safe alternative, but being respectful of people's decisions. And so it was, to say the least, it was a unique time, I think, for everybody kind of getting back into the swing of things and actually interacting with people, interacting in society, doing face-to-face engagements, because people had very strong views on both sides of the aisles.
yeah, definitely makes sense. And I think there's so much value in being in person versus being virtual, right? Because your mannerisms, your style, you are as a person is amplified beyond virtuality, right? So I really appreciate those things, and I would say just touch upon your work with the Device Alliance and all these things that you've been doing in the nonprofits aspects, and how are you elevating the healthcare community?
Yeah, so Device Alliance, for those that don't know, it's a 501c3. It's a total nonprofit organization. Yeah, it's been around since about 2010. We are, lucky enough to have, a few hundred members. We've got large sponsors. We have large strategics. And as far as the mission and vision of Device Alliance has always been to kind of be the one-stop shop where people go to collaborate outside of their professional organizations and academic institutions. It started originally with people that wanted to leave corporate and say, where do I go to connect to find people I can start a business with? I want to become an entrepreneur now. Where can I go to kind of meet and have these high level conversations? And as the organization grew under the various presidents with Kevin McNerney, and then when I initially joined Device Alliance, Travis Smith took over as president, and he kind of elevated the organization as far as really putting on quality events, as far as not only just obviously the networking mixers are great, but content, panels, discussion, and things that really need to be addressed in the ecosystem, like addressing the pain points, right? Focuses on leadership, focuses on project management, talent acquisition and retention, and a lot of topics that kind of helped really drive membership. It kind of took us to a different level. And we also became a little bit more inclusive organization with the sense of we started to welcome young professionals. And so then it wasn't exclusively just an executive club. We started kind of recognizing the next generation of leadership that need to be a part of this organization to kind of help us create a legacy in Orange County. And so, with that said, my tenure as president, I owe pretty much everything to the amazing team I had. I had just an amazing chair of membership, and Tricia Ari, Tyler Train, my IP lawyer, who was the chair of logistics, Joanne Lee, who, my gosh, did everything. They really put some blood, sweat, and tears, and we elevated the organization to get to a certain, almost a threshold of like, okay, now where do we go? And it was kind of putting for-profit aspirations on a nonprofit vehicle, which is a lot of work, and one event a month, it's a lot of time, especially putting on a quality event, right? Because I think the one thing that Device Alliance I'm really proud of, that's been really conscientious of, is protecting the brand of that name. And I say that because I'm sure you've been in a situation, everyone out there, you go to an event from an organization and it's not well planned. And you can kind of see the logistics falling apart. You can see it's not really tight. And the one thing that our team all agreed on is the most guilty thing you can do is waste people's time. That's the most precious asset. And so if you go to an event, it should be run tight. The agenda should be tight. The speakers are prepped. Everything just runs smoothly. And that feedback I always felt really proud of, because everyone goes, we know when we come to an event that it's going to be a quality event from you all. Since I've stepped down as president now, as far as your question, as far as elevating the ecosystem, I'm happy to say that this year was kind of a transition year, but we have several new leadership members who are actually going to be on our team. And as any leader would hope, someone's going to come along and, basically say, Scott, I can do a better job than you. That's awesome. And certainly, I am now considered kind of part of the old guard, but I'm really anxious to work with the new leadership team, see where they want to elevate the region. And I think just take advantage of a lot of these strategic relationships that are looking to flourish. If you look at like Orange County as a whole, I believe the latest stats I've read, from the CLSA reports to, Biocom and all the various industries, we're roughly sitting at about a $50 to $51 billion economic output in Orange County. And if you look at the total amount of jobs supported, you're looking at roughly about 150,000. 62,000 are probably in industry, but then there's the supporting service providers, suppliers. And then you're also talking about like roughly $300 in funding from NIH, from grants. And so there's tons of metrics and there's tons of just mobility. But what's happening now is I think the region is slowly waking up to the importance of copying other economic long-term strategy plans that they've done, like in Minnesota or Boston, to kind of mirror that in Orange County to make sure we're creating a legacy here. And I'd like to think that Device Alliance is kind of the glue between those building blocks.
Yeah, the thing I respect about you, Scott, is that you back your comments by with evidence, right? With some truth in terms of your experiences and what you've learned and what you've achieved as a human being and as a leader and as an executive. And I really enjoy that because I learn a lot from that regard. But I would say, yeah, you mentioned one thing that I want to touch upon. It's called time, right? Human beings have time, right? It's an even playing field. We all have 24 hours in a day, correct? Some people have more money, some people have less, but guess what? If you optimize the time, you can actually get the best success levels according to your values. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's always where you're striving for, right? But I think, something I've, was slow to learn in life is, the power of saying no. Even my old business partner, like just understanding the value of your time and where it's directed. I remember, gosh, this was years ago, just kind of going back and like you just audit your day, right? Like an interesting example that you can kind of give all of your listeners is do an honest assessment, or actually look at the stats on your phone and look at how much you're staring at your phone all day. Now, I would wager to say, and by the way, I'm not above this, so I was certainly guilty of this. Look at the time that you've spent basically wasting it. Now, I'm not talking about the things that you have to do. I mean, just staring at that screen and then just ask yourself, what was the opportunity cost of doing this versus doing something else? And, if you can have that honest conversation with yourself, it's really, really an eye opener because, when you work hard and play hard, and I know like in the entrepreneurship world, it's like this whole, it never used to be like, they used to say this work-life balance, which I always just laugh because there's kind of no such thing. But the work hard, play hard, I definitely agree with. So if you're going to put in that time, if you're going to work hard, like at the end of the day, what's the impact, right? I mean, did you just shuffle things around? Did you just do things to check boxes? Or like at the end of it, what were the results? And I found in my life where I've like sat there and done things. I'm like, okay, what was the impact of it? And I look at them all, this was not worth the ROI. I wasted that. And then not only did I waste that time, I wasted it when it could have been doing something else. So yeah, obviously an important point in anyone's life, like just do an audit of what your day looks like and then look back at it and just say to yourself, did I really, really have a busy day? Or did I have an impactful day?
Yeah, and I know you appreciate sports, you appreciate hockey, you appreciate baseball, and like it's impossible to actually make it that level, right? It's one of these things where how many human beings actually want to be on that level? Guess what? They don't appreciate the time they put into something, but then they get called up and they realize, wow, I'm actually playing at Citi Field.
Yeah,
I'm playing at Yankee Stadium, and those things that that is that one thing that people appreciate. Whether you're a Mendoza line hitter or you're someone on the bench, you're still in the game, and that's beauty, right? I would say people put in that time, they train over and over and over again to get to that level. So I just want to hear your thoughts about that.
I mean, you're kind of speaking to like the fundamental algorithm of life, right? Repeat what works. It's not more complicated than that, right? And just I think to your point also too. I hear a lot of talk about when because we talked about sports a little bit, and I work out in the mornings, and I always hear people saying, oh my gosh, you have you have so much motivation. You have so much motivation, and oh, you're so motivated. Or whether it's work, oh, you're so motivated. And I'm telling you, motivation means nothing. There are mornings I wake up and I'm not motivated to crawl out of bed at 5:15. What matters is discipline. Like you have to go through actions like you're brushing your teeth every day. Like this is what I do. Like you don't. And by the way, you don't need to be motivated. All right. Some days you will not have any motivation. You will hate doing the thing that is, but you do it anyway, like you love it, right? I think it was like Mike Tyson once said that, and I thought it was really great. You do what you hate anyways, though you love it. But the thing is, you have to understand that you're doing the work because you understand that that is necessary to get the results you want. Because if you don't get the results you want, then the man in the mirror is basically responsible. So, yeah, once again, it's don't worry so much about being motivated. Worry about the discipline of doing it.
Right. The way I look at it is more like getting 1% better every day, right? We don't deserve to be perfect as human beings. We'll never be perfect. No one's perfect. But the point is that you get better 1% every day, and it's called exponential value. And you provided that in terms of your impact on healthcare and all these things. So,
well, you know what? Also, too, Amit, like think of it like this. I was late to learn this in life. You're not. The number one person you're competing against is a version of yourself from yesterday. That's who your competition is. You start doing peer review, you start doing all these other things, and there's that analogy of the story with the two guys that wake up and they say, oh my gosh, the lion's going to be chasing us today. How fast do we have to run? And the friend says, well, I just have to run faster than you. Yeah, that's, I get it. That's a competitive mindset, and I understand that, and that's healthy. But also, at the end of the day, what's your metric for watching your own personal success, right? So it's really about you being best version of yourself every day? And are you the best version of yourself when you step up and do business? And, whether you go on a date, whether you are in business, whether you're in a nonprofit, whether you're bringing your relationships to your family, are you that best version of yourself, right?
Absolutely. I think that time that you're investing in yourself is a function of any success that you have or failures, actually. Because if you invest the wrong time, the wrong places, you will not succeed. But if you invest the right time, you will gain a value that is your values, right? So, but if you, the way I think about it is more undivided attention, right? If you focus on one person, like I'm focused on Scott, and Scott is focused on me right now. How beautiful is that, right? We deserve each other's attention, and you give me your time. But imagine if you do that in something else, as a business, as an entrepreneur, as a as the next Elon Musk,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
As the next person that not people don't like, but guess what? I like him. Yeah. So I would say let's like dive into more of your radio show and the people you've spoken with, and how they've impacted you and vice versa. Is that okay?
Yeah. Yeah, of course. So it was interesting. I saw you do a post on oh my gosh, my conversation with Mike Masolan back when he was CEO of Edwards. It was that was definitely a blast from the past. But yeah, when I initially give a shout out to one of my good friends, Creighton Cheney, who is he actually worked with me and he did the production for the podcast years ago. And so I want to say this was roughly 2017. We were sitting around just saying, hey, maybe we should do like this MedTech podcast. And we kind of thought it'd be kind of cool. We looked into the production value of it and all that stuff. And I mean, it was very much, it was very, very guerrilla, so to speak. I mean, literally just me, microphones, my laptop, and just walking in and just kind of having a interview. Because one of the challenges we were facing is we were trying to get these really big KOLs and these SMEs to come and speak at our device science events, but the CEOs were much too busy with their time. So I thought, okay, maybe I can come to them. Maybe I can kind of create a separate document, that I can look back at, and we can have a quality conversation addressing the multiple spectrums and disciplines within MedTech. I mean, it's like there's so many, where to even begin, and there's such a rich consortium of intellectuals and leaders here. I thought it would be a really cool place to start, fishing, for interviews. So, once we did a couple interviews, we were kind of getting our legs under us. And then when we did the interview with Mike Masalam, who was generous enough at his with his time to allow us to interview him, then it kind of took off in the sense of like it was pretty easy to get in touch with a lot of people. And so that that was like a passion project, and it was leading all the way up prior to COVID. And it was interesting. I mean, because my gosh, prior to COVID, I want to say there was probably maybe 20 or 22 medical device podcasts out there. And then after COVID, there's like 90. And so, everyone started using that as a platform to kind of get their voices out and have quality conversations. And it's great, the more the merrier, but what happened with me was, we got up to a particular level of episodes, and then I had to kind of focus my time and my effort, in the career, because between being the president of Device Alliance, overseeing all the events that are there, just running the day-to-day operations and the podcast on top of doing your work, it just became a little bit too much. And I had to like pause it for a little bit, but we're happy to kind of be starting this back up because it was pretty well received. It focused on Orange County, we call them the Orange County MedTech Heroes, which was kind of a nice little flavor to us because there's not a lot of focus here on that. So yeah, as far as my interaction with the leaders, oh my gosh, like, I think of so many like awesome conversations I have. Obviously, Mike Masolan being the CEO of Edwards was one. I remember we spoke with Ray Cohen at Axonics. This is way before his company was purchased by BD. For I think up to the tune of like, if I'm not mistaken, gosh, like $1 billion there. So, in addition, had chances to speak with just kind of going all over the place here. Back when Stacy Pugh was the general manager at Medtronic Neurovascular, spoke with Warren Faust when he was the VP over at J&J Vision, and even spoke with local engineering guys, R&D people, a lot of femtech leaders, Marinella Gombasev, so it was really great to not only get all their unique perspectives, but also kind of recognize those common themes that would consistently come up where you're kind of thinking about, okay, I wonder how this is going to shape, or this is how it's going to look. And the way that we wanted to make sure that we had the interview was the last thing we wanted was it kind of to be an infomercial. Do you know what I mean? Like, you kind of going through and they're just, it kind of goes through and they're just kind of, selling the company, right? I kind of wanted a little bit more of a flavor of authenticity. Like, who are you? How did you get into this? What are some life lessons learned? Because, Creighton and I, when he would go through the editing process, to hear the prim colored rose path story, it's like, yeah, that's great, but it just feels like PR. So I'm like, give me the dirty. Like what happened? Like, how did you lose $30 million? What was that like? How did that impact your company? My God, you were going bankrupt. How did you go to get this fund? Like, what was the most important mistakes you made in your life that you actually learned from it? And that's much more relatable. And we would hear feedback from the community saying, that's a great episode. Or that was a good conversation. Like, I appreciated that, right? And so, yeah, tons of themes, come from all the leaders, and it was just, it's great that that's a permanent document. And I'm like excited now that we have the new leadership team installed that I'm able to kind of blow the dust off that and get that kind of launched up for 2025.
Yeah, that's very amazing. I would say you said one thing that really resonates with me is that direction and time and actually working with the right people, right? Failure is okay. I failed too, just like you failed. Just like a lot of people who are entrepreneurs, they fail too. You don't succeed on the first time. You succeed on the 100th time, right? So when people talk about failures, I'll keep mentioning Elon Musk. You know why? Because he failed multiple times. SpaceX, he failed. Did he give up? No. He'll never give up unless he's dead or completely incapacitated. You got to cut off his head, type of thing. So, it's one of these things. I can't even say the word, but the point is that his mind is always going to be there, right? I don't even say that word on purpose because I would say that he's connected to everything that he wants to do. Everything he does is connected. Neuralink, SpaceX, Tesla, the Boring Company, they're all connected.
Yeah.
And people know that.
I saw the other day that he's like a #1 video game player. I'm just like, well, how does this guy? He's crazy. Like, how does he have time for all this stuff? Yeah, he's a very unique human being, to say the least.
I think he likes Diablo, the game, the video game. He likes to. The thing is that he likes simulations, right? And I think that's why he loves video games, and he loves to really, I would say, take advantage of those skills that he has to actually prove a point. And many people don't understand that because they'll judge him for the wrong reasons, but it is whatever. It is you're entitled to your opinion, and we don't promote violence, all these things and whatnot. But I would say that progressing humanity is a very value of me, and I actually value of him too.
Yeah, I mean, love him or hate him, you cannot deny his impact in the world. It's like when I sit there and I see him parallel parking rockets, it's like I wonder if people truly kind of understand the significance of that moment. Like kind of looking at what that not only means, but the implication in that milestone that just kind of inspires the next generation. So yeah, like I said, he might be a polarizing individual, but he's definitely probably one of the most interesting people, I would say, on the planet right now. So for sure.
Yeah, I like to connect some dots, and I'm curious about what you think about this. So, obviously, he sells in China, he sells in different countries, and he knows markets very well, and he has a presence there. So, how do you feel about certain countries right now in terms of your business development and what you guys are doing in the neurovascular space?
Yeah, I mean, so obviously, from a high level, just from a regulatory perspective, we help clients, commercialize and launch, obviously, within the EU market, with CE marks. And so that was obviously a big challenge after the UMDR ratifications that happened a few years ago, and that continues to be a challenge. The one thing that I did notice at my previous job as Scrum Engineering, and even more so now, is just how COVID just kind of hit a hard reset on a lot of supply chains, right? So from the global perspective, it's, whether it's Shockwave building facilities down in Costa Rica, or, people looking at their raw materials as far as the sources of where they come from, the political implications and being cognizant of that for their future growth, it is a huge topic of concern. And I mean, I remember last year, just the potential for silicon shortages should there be any conflicts with Taiwan and China, and to have a backup strategy for that. So I mean, no longer can people stay insulated in their little bubbles. Yes, there are a few medical device players that kind of tend to do that, but then also too, you are increasing the danger of if something happens from your Canadian supplier, whatever it might be, then you haven't leveraged the global capacity of like, where else are you going to plug and play, especially with distribution channels, if you're in Europe. So I mean, it's not even a want, it's a need as far as the implications of also going to other countries. Currently right now, I mean, M4D, we are currently in the process of bringing on a Vietnamese manufacturing plant, which is absolutely huge, for us as a business. But obviously that comes with all of the challenges, with working with another country, and it's certainly, it's a huge opportunity, but a huge challenge. And, some people, that don't really mitigate that risk and truly understand it and give it the time it takes to kind of get up and get its feet moving, it becomes just a necessary portfolio strategy, especially if you're going to be working with clients around the globe. M4D, we have multiple KOLs and SMEs that are at multiple conferences all around the world. Just at SVIN, when we were last week, our team was able to meet some of our global clients from roughly about 10 to 15 countries that they all come from. And so, yeah, I mean, it's all in play, but at the end of the day, they all want to get their products launched here in the US, right? You go through the FDA and then it's gravy. But also too, with respect to a lot of the opportunities, especially with, neurovascular technology, we're starting to see a lot more appetite for different areas of unmet clinical needs. And so how do you leverage those global strengths in that early phase, whether you have to get a CRO out of country or whether you have to use a clinical trial in Paraguay or, whatever it is, having that global mindset is not even, if you don't have that, you're immediately crippled in your long-term strategy.
Yeah, and the two words, I would say keywords that you just mentioned is leverage and bubbles, right? It's one of those things that I enjoy analyzing because I would say that yes, bubbles exist, bubbles do pop. As a kid, I loved to blow bubbles, right? In terms of like seeing, and then they'll pop right in front of my face, just like the .com bubble, right? It was a bubble. Guess what? Amazon survived it. Jeff Bezos survived it. You can survive it too with the right mindset, right? And I promote these things on LinkedIn, and I would say that he starts selling cars now, and I was like, wow, like 2-day Amazon shipping type of stuff. I was like, wow, but he wasn't the right person to sell books, but he did. He wasn't the right person to sell anything. He did.
Yeah.
So there's a beauty in that. Do you agree or no?
I mean, yeah, I mean, obviously, the ability to be adaptable in this market is, I would say probably the number one necessary asset to be able to be successful. I mean, MedTech has never been a static environment. It is changing all the time. And so many things are going to make you all the way from prototyping to building a product that you have to be able to make those changes on the fly. And then even if you do go to market, then you find out that there's, ancillary unmet clinical needs that your product addresses, things like that. are you going to have a portfolio? What does that look like? Where do you invest your time? So, I mean, yeah, you have to be prepared for all these things to burst. I mean, AI, like we have yet to even fathom the impact that AI will have on the medical device industry. I mean, information now is going to be kind of it's going to be a commodity like water. Everyone's going to have it, but then what do you do with that, and how do you strategize that to, as you put it, work out of these bubbles, burst these bubbles, heck, create new bubbles. You know what I mean? So yeah, I mean, to your point, the adaptability of med tech companies now is going to be, I see AI having a huge impact on that. I see the commercialization, or I should say the consumerization of medical devices, actually getting more user interface with people before they need devices, the collection of data, and then obviously too, just seeing how, from my personal bias, like seeing how Orange County decides to develop and grow these individual silos, and whether they all kind of fall under the same umbrella, or do they actually work in their own little bubbles, because the specificity is so niche to understand truly what that market is. I mean, yeah, it's I guess probably a conversation for somebody a little smarter than me on these echo chambers, that we all work in. But yeah, being able to pivot and being able to adaptable on that stuff is obviously going to be a critical aspect to leadership during this time for these med tech companies.
Yeah, I agree. And the trends of yesterday are the trends of tomorrow, right? We have
Mhm.
one meme, we have one something today. Tomorrow is going to be different, and that's the way society changes, right? And we know this very well. And what's interesting is that I was reading about Google's supercomputer uh, through Sundar, and his values on a meaning of a 10 to the 25th exponential value, which is actually beyond the universe's beginning, our universe that we know. So we can solve calculations, I would say, within 5 minutes, that is beyond the universe. So that is the capabilities of actually saving lives too. If you can connect the dots in that regard, right? In terms of utilizing those computer mathematics, and also utilizing space-time continuum, and also understanding, I would say, human life, right? So it's one of these things where, look, I'm not a rocket scientist, I'm not a theoretical physicist, but you know, theories exist for a reason, right? And Einstein exists for a reason. So the point is that I really enjoy these topics because it makes me think out loud, and people like you who are kind of leading the healthcare systems, and leading the shows for, I would say, understanding how to really give value to the patients. That is what I'm trying to do, and I just want to hear your comments about that.
Well, I mean, just for clarity, I definitely not in healthcare. I'm in med device and med tech, so healthcare is being a whole another bag. But I think the conversation is kind of more focused on like the next generation of entrepreneurs, because I'm thinking, where is innovation coming from? It just seems that when I think of the trends for med tech in 2024 and beyond, you know, as I mentioned before, post-election, the public markets, they're opening up a little bit. The models for investing in med tech I've seen have kind of changed over time. So, the core competencies of like the strategics and the large mid cap companies, they don't reflect where med tech is going. And basically it's like the innovation's kind of creeping in. It's like kind of coming in on the edges. So it's like all the M&A, they just kind of like, I've seen everyone just kind of like, they wait and they wait till the risk is like retired. Like, we're going to wait till that risk is done. So, and then once it's all done, then we'll come in. We're going to pay a higher premium, but then we're going to and it makes sense for kind of smart money to move slower. But I'm like focusing on where is that innovation? Where is that next gen technology coming from? And how are all these changes in the ecosystem going to basically reflect innovation? So those young, medium, older entrepreneurs, that's kind of a lot, especially where M4D's business is focused at. And so I think looking at kind of some of these other deal flows that are happening, but kind of studying their pathways to success, and also creating and understanding the ecosystem of like what these strategics and forgive me, what these like early innovators need to succeed in medtech. And so I hope that kind of answers your question, right? You're kind of getting a little more into the forward thinking of like where the industry is going. And, there's obviously a whole nother conversation here to unpack with respect to the entrepreneurs and what they're trying to do and what we can do to support those efforts.
No, I definitely agree with you. I would say that my like I said value is more like it's very difficult to involve AI in hardware these days. But software as a medical device exists, right? Things like Apple Watch, things that all these, Dexcoms work on certain aspects, and they want to do non-invasive glucose type of things, and I have family members that are diabetic, and
Mm.
we don't want like to we don't like to be pinched, do you?
That's funny.
So it's one of these things where I'm just trying to understand how to actually make this happen in a future reality that will exist. Because I think the way technology is run right now is it's very powerful, and it's also very influential, and it's also very innovative. And then you just have the right regulations and design controls around it, and risk management around it. What is the risk? What is the design? How can we achieve patient safety without cutting corners? That is my goal as a human being, honestly.
Yeah. Well, prior to this conversation, we were talking a little bit about my exposure to entrepreneurs and, some of the work I did consulting with a lot of companies that are kind of bringing products to market. So uh, I'm curious, just from your perspective, like what are you looking for the most when you think of 2025, right? And your engagement with entrepreneurs and your goals for this podcast? No, are you kind of working to kind of shed light on, is it the young leaders that are leading the generation kind of moving forward? Are they taking the best shared practices? Like you what unique conversations are you trying to have here on your podcast show with respect to the things we've discussed?
I would say I like to look at different countries and understand their values and what they're doing. I
Mm.
speak with people from New Zealand, Australia, India, which is my parents' home, but I'm a reflection of them, in Bangalore, and also these different ecosystems, right? And they love to actually work with me, because I connect the dots for them, and they all want to penetrate the U.S. market, which is the biggest medtech market, as we know, and then Europe's next, right? So it's one of these things where I try to understand why they want to do certain aspects and why they want to do certain things, and I listen to them very, very closely, understand what their values are in terms of medtech and their products and what they're trying to do, and then I interface with the FDA
Mm.
in that regard. So I connect the dots for them. I said, look, I have my own thoughts and values, but I'm not perfect. Neither is Scott. Neither is society. Neither is the world, neither is the solar system, neither is the universe, right? And there's no perfection that exists, but we get 1% better every day, like I said. So just like they're getting better, I'm getting better based on them. So it's a mutual relationship, and I think that is my focus. Honestly, I like to understand cultural values of people, and how they're doing certain things and how they're executing their values in different ecosystems. So it's a different I would say mechanism, but I love it so much that I would say I thrive in it.
Yeah. Well, good for you. I mean, if the world is your podcasting lead list, yeah, you're going to be a busy man for the next decade or so. So good for you.
Yeah. I'm thinking a little bit above about 10 years, but I would say people like you, people like Dave Ferrer, you guys are the leading the show, and I look up to people like you because you guys have thrived in your own realm, and you guys have done a lot of good things, and I really respect those things.
Yeah. Well, thank you, man. Definitely much appreciated.
Yeah. And then yeah, just I want to kind of go into your nonprofit areas. Why did you get into that? How did you even how do you value these things in that regard, right? You're trying to give back, because the reason I ask this question is because I like to give back too, and I just don't know how to in the right way, right? I want to give back to humanity. I want to give back to society. I want to give all the jobs that I want to. But the point is that, why did you get into it, and how do you do it?
Yeah, well, I truthfully, I got into it for selfish reasons because, you know, by the time that, when I had finished my schooling and I knew this was the industry I wanted to get into, I was simply doing it to hang out with people smarter than me. That was at the end of the day, and to just learn from them and to really kind of get a sense of this community and to understand what it was that I needed to know and what was important, and honestly, I remember when I first got into device science and I kind of looked at the group, I looked at the cohort. They were extremely welcoming community. I had great quality conversations, but the one thing I noticed, and I had, been a part of other groups before in the past, but there was just for lack of a better word, there was just a very relaxed and a very cordial vibe to Device Alliance that I really appreciated, where people were always willing to engage and have good conversations. And that's, I mean, me being brand new to the industry, that was all that I needed. And I remember, this is really early on when I was like going to take any, role I possibly could in the organization. I said, hey, I'll take on the chair of memberships if that was it. And it was available. So I remember at a certain point, we actually had like a list of all of our members, our paid. I remember saying to myself, I'm going to go through this list and I'm going to have as many cups of coffee with as many people as I can on this list that I want to. And I think it took me maybe close to about 2 years before I had probably meetings with at least close to 80 to 90 of those people. And these were all C-level suite people and above. They all had different aspects of the business. I just needed to kind of learn from their experience and get a sense of like not only what it was I was getting into, but I mean, heck, just these are people that have become my mentors, and two of them I still talk to this day, and they were instrumental in some of my career movement as well. And so I just remember going into it thinking, okay, good things will come, but you have to give first, right? And I knew getting into the nonprofit, it is one of the funniest things that people say to me is like people come up to me and they go, "Oh gosh, so man, you've been working at a Device Alliance for this many times." I go, "Well, keep in mind it's a volunteer." And they go, "Oh, you're not paid for this?" And I, no, we all just kind of smile and they're like, "Oh, so like, what did you do during the day, right?" But the value of Device Alliance when I was initially getting into it, I remember having the mindset, and I had a mentor tell me once, like, you don't go into something and asking, what do I get out of this? Right? I mean, you have to kind of have a mentality of like, okay, what am I willing to give? How can I help others first? And I'm a true believer in that things will come to you, right? Because I don't know if you've ever been to a networking mixer and somebody comes up to you and within the first minute of them meeting you, they're asking you for something. And you're like, I just met you, and it doesn't really leave the best first impression, but it's like, if you just think about the best way to make a first impression, if you are actually willing to help someone that you don't know, I promise you that will go tenfold farther than you walking up to somebody and asking them for something that you just met them. It's the equivalent to like making a LinkedIn connection, and next thing you know, you get a 3-paragraph thing on like they want to sell you something. You're like, whoa, okay, sorry, I made that connection. I can't delete those fast enough, right? But you have to be able to give. You have to be able to put something forward, and it will come back. And here's a perfect example of this. During COVID, when people were losing their jobs, and it was a scary time for a lot of people, especially MedTech and people that had, just purchased homes, just started families. I mean, heck, they were living by themselves and they had lost their jobs. And I would see them come to these, meetings, and I'd see them come online and I'd get the emails. And these were people that they lost their job. And then they said, oh, now it's time. It's important for me to start networking with the MedTech community. And at that point, it's not that it's too late, but you picked the wrong time. Like your community, your personal brand, your reputation, how you interact with the community and what you gave, that's a garden that you're going to have to water for your entire life. I mean, this is all about building relationships. This is all about, what are you kind of doing to help others and what are you doing to help the ecosystem? If your only interaction is, I need something, now I'll go do this, it's not going to work out well for you, you know? And and one of the things that Orange County has as just a value, I remember I was giving a talk with Biosciences LA, and there was, gosh, 100 plus people. And I talked a little bit about the benefits of device science and working through Orange County and kind of going through your whole spiel. And these people in LA just all smiled. Like some of them were like, I could see them visibly smiling. And I said, I can tell there's a couple of people that may not agree with me with what I have going on here. And they said, no, Scott, you have to understand, I live in LA. What you just said is a physical impossibility for me. I said, oh, can you explain? Give me an example. He's like, you just said after work, you can drive for 20 minutes. You can meet a group of 80 MedTech professionals, make 2 or 3 quality conversations that you can either receive help from or help others from, go home, be in time for your dinner with your wife at 7 o'clock, tuck the kids into bed, work on a little bit of stuff and go to bed. If I tried that in LA, that's a 4-hour endeavor. I'm not going to see my kids. I'm going to be driving for an hour to go 4 miles. Can't find park, like so all these things. And the reason I bring that up is that he says, you have the ability to build face-to-face relationships. We don't have that in LA. And he goes, you take that for granted. And I realize I do take that for granted. Like, good luck trying to raise $10 million on a prototype you're going to be looking at in a Zoom call versus meeting someone and sitting down and actually having a cup of coffee with them, right? So those, once again, the value of the relationships, the value of the network that we build, and the people that I've seen that consistently succeed at that are the ones that I see them out there in the community all the time, and they have a genuine like passion for being a part of this MedTech community. They have a genuine passion for helping others. And I see good things happen to and for them all the time. And that's really what it all comes down to. You don't have to overcomplicate it. You get what you want, but you have to deserve what you want. If you want a quality network, if you want a good standing in the community, if you want a good personal brand, you got to get in there and earn that. And I promise if you put in that work, you'll deserve the benefits on the end of it. Does that make sense?
Perfect sense. I think listening, right? Listening is what you do very well as a person in your environment, what you do and how you bring business in, and also it's not about bringing business, more about helping each other. It's a mutual relationship, right? So when you bring in money, guess what? They trust you so much that they'll keep working with you. It's called recurring revenue.
Yeah.
So so it's one of these things I'm trying to understand as myself as well, and I totally respect that. And I always say, me as a young entrepreneur, I'm learning day by day. I've failed, I've succeeded, I've failed, and I've succeeded. And I just want you to give a take-home message to the crowd. As a human being and as a youngster, and as people who reach out to me actually from many different I would say countries, and especially India, and I want to really support them on how to get to the next level. And I'll give them all my time. I'll spend my hours with them. I want to make that next person become something special. What would you say to those people in terms of why are you don't be afraid, but failure, and why should you actually appreciate failure? Can you comment on that as a take-home message?
Gosh, failure can either be the death of you or it can be the greatest teacher, right? I don't, to my earlier point on some of those leaders I spoke with on the podcast, nobody wants to hear a prim-colored rose past story. My good friend of mine, Ron Tedesco, he said he was going for an interview at a company up here in California, and he said something that stuck with me really quick. He said, it's not about failing. It's about being allergic to making the same mistake twice, right? If you're making that same mistake twice, then you're kind of dialed into doing the fundamental principles of those that keep learning will keep rising, right? Those that keep learning keep rising, and failure is a part of life. My gosh, like, it's just like, it is inevitable, and I remember, there was this old story, like, you talk about like Steve Jobs walking around the place, and he would, his office, and he'd say, how many mistakes have you made today? And some guy would say, like, I've made 10. And how many mistakes have you made? I've made none. And he'd go to the guy who made 10 mistakes, and he'd like work with him, because the person who makes none, they're not risking anything. They're not changing anything. They're not challenging anything. They're not thinking outside the box. They're staying right within their lane that's safe. Good luck with that as a strategy for life moving forward. If being humbled, and I've been humbled more times than I ever care to admit, being humbled is a great way for you to do a self-assessment and audit, be like, okay, what just happened there? And then the next time it does happen in your mind, you can be like, I should have known better. This has happened again, right? And then what you do with that information is totally up to you, right? I mean, it's just, if you want to tackle the big ideas, if you want to be in the big disciplines and you want to use them routinely, the fundamental algorithm of life, repeat what works, right? So you made a mistake, part of the game. What do you do to adapt? Right? We've kind of touched on a couple of these things during our conversations, right? So, I mean, don't be afraid to change. You're only trying to be a better version of yourself than you were yesterday. And I think, especially if I were like to talk to one of the entrepreneurs out there, and I heard this consistently through my podcast, and I hear this consistently with every entrepreneur that is successful. You need to build a community, a brand, and a network of people and champions and others that will help you solve problems you don't need to solve. They can help them solve them for you. You're not going to be an expert at everything, nor should you be. I mean, knowing what you don't know is 10 times more important than you being a genius at something. You being a genius at one thing, that's great. We've had clients like this in the past. They know everything about one thing, so they think it permeates to everything else in life. But knowing what you don't know and knowing when to be like, hey, do you know this area? Like, and having that humility and having that intuition about I've made mistakes, but I don't know this. Where can I humble myself and learn more? That's going to get you 10 times farther than being the smartest guy in the room. And so those entrepreneurs, the MedTech people, we talk about the innovators, the next gen, they've got a network of people. They understand the lanes that they drive in well. They humble themselves, and they definitely put others first before they put themselves, because it builds them so much social credibility. When the time comes, they'll be somebody that other people want to help.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think what I've learned from your comment was that being genuine, right, of your thoughts, your feelings, and what you want to achieve, and those people will reflect that upon you, and then that's how you build a very special relationship.
Yeah.
So
Amen. I mean, it's I will tell you, I made it a personal promise to myself. I did not ask anyone from Device Alliance for any favors within the first 3 years of my being there. And that wasn't by, the fact that I didn't need favors. Trust me, goodness knows I knew I needed a lot of them, but I knew that I had to kind of earn my way first before, if you actually did get in a situation and you said, hey, can I get your thoughts on this? Here's the situation I'm at. What are your thoughts on this? People were beyond helpful in helping me make decisions and helping kind of guide where I'm at today. So yeah, you just have that mindset, kind of the go-giver mentality, right? You have that go-giver mentality, it's going to take you far in life.
yeah, that's why I always offer people help, in terms of how could I help you, right, as you are helping me. That's called building that genuinity. It's called building that relationships, and it's more of like a vice versa thing. Let's help each other out,
Yeah.
please.
I mean,
We're
Dave
building
Ferrer,
communities.
Dave Ferrer, him and I have been friends for a while. He said, hey, I know this great guy. He's getting his podcast off the ground. You're definitely going to want to connect to him. And then look, and here we are today, right? So yeah, case in point.
Yeah, but I would say thanks for your time today, Scott, and I appreciate your thoughts, your feelings, and your comments about what you've been through in life, and also how you're kind of advancing your companies and your values, honestly, to the next level. And I really respect that. And I would say thank you once again. And I look forward to meeting.
Absolutely, man. Thanks again for your time, Amit. Really stay in touch, and hey, best of luck getting this thing off the ground. I'm sure you'll be
Yeah.
successful.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.